Okay. Well, welcome everybody, and that is online in Zoom, and a few hardy souls that are here in the community center in South Euclid. We're going to talk today about staying positive during difficult times. And I first started giving this presentation in the midst of the pandemic, and since then the presentation has evolved. And the fact is that many of us are constantly riding the waves of things that are happening that cause us stress and distress and anxiety and confusion and difficulties in lots of different ways. And so I think it's helpful to readdress this on an ongoing basis as we really try to focus ourselves inward and stay grounded in the moment, even when things are swirling around us. And when I think about staying positive, I want to make sure that we recognize that it's not about putting a smile on our face when something is going wrong. Because there are times when we have to deal with what's in front of us and not just put a smile on our face. But what we are going to talk about is learning to discern what is ours to deal with and what is not ours to deal with. And at the crux of staying positive is owning your energy and your responsibility in all situations. And I love this idea of the wave because for me, life is like that. Sometimes we're surfing and we're feeling good, and other times we're underneath the water, just trying to hang on and hold our breath until we get our opportunity to break the surface. Oh no. Now it's not working. Oh, there we go. So I want to frame what positivity is, and it is the quality of having a positive attitude. But that doesn't mean that we don't recognize the circumstances. It is just at its most basic quality that we feel positive, and that means that we can take action when appropriate and allow ourselves to step back and allow others to step in when it's their responsibility. And I love this little dude swimming. He's got a positive attitude to me, even though he's underwater. So I know that we have talked about this, oh no, about this particular quote before, and I often refer back to it because at the core of my own personal meditation practice and at the core of what my life's journey has been about, and the work that I have done in coaching other people, is this idea that our practice and all those healthy habits that we talk about are an opportunity for us to carefully observe what's happening around us. And so this quote by Viktor Frankl is, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. And positivity is about understanding what is ours to deal with and what is other people's to deal with. And I talk about that so frequently because it's about not just being positive, but conserving our energy. It's difficult to be positive if we don't have our own energy that we are conserving appropriately. There we go. So why is it that positivity is so important? It's because emotions can carry us away. And emotions are our physical sensation response to things that are happening around us, right? It's not feelings, which are often generated based on past experiences, but emotions are something that come out of us in the moment, right? They can be positive and joyous. They can be sad. They can be fearful. Emotions are in the moment. And as part of the journey of learning to be positive is understanding that emotions are something that we can experience, but not allow us to be carried away by them. And the reason is because emotions, if they carry us away, can cause physical illness. We also always used to talk about, in terms of like a manifestation of this, was ulcers, right? Ulcers, we know now, are actually a bacterial infection, but they are often caused and exacerbated by physical distress. And it disrupts our relationships, right? So if we feel emotionally charged in situations, it's very difficult for us to have great relationships with the people that we work with. So if we constantly feel emotionally carried away, either with anger or with fear in situations that we cannot control, then we're less likely to be able to connect effectively with those people that we work with, as well as our loved ones. It also diminishes our focus. Did you ever have that experience, right? You wake up late, you're rushing through the day, something bad happens, and we just all of a sudden fall apart over something that normally would have just been something we rolled with. And that's because we're allowing our emotions to rule us in this situation. It also impairs our judgment. People who are carried away by their emotions tend to make really poor judgment calls. You see this a lot in young children and teenagers. They're angry about something and then they make a really bad decision and they make things worse for themselves. And if we're honest, we sometimes do that to ourselves as well. And so it diminishes our focus and it impairs our judgment. So we tend to, instead of being thoughtful about what's happening in front of us and what is the best course of action, we have an emotional response that causes us to oftentimes make decisions that aren't in our or anybody else's best interest. And emotions destroy our peace of mind. And so positivity and an understanding of our own emotional response doesn't mean that you don't have an emotional response. It's that you recognize that you're in the midst of it and understand that it is something that will pass, right? And if we can acknowledge it and feel it generally in our body, right? So if we're feeling joyous, we often feel it from here. And when we're feeling distressed or anxious, a lot of us can feel it in the throat or sometimes in the forehead. For each of us, it's a little bit different. But noticing what the emotion is, where it lives in our body, helps us to recognize this. And when we have something and we bring it out into the light, it loses its hold on us, right? It's the things that we don't acknowledge and that we kind of push down that end up taking a bigger toll on us. So emotions can carry us away, and it's important to make sure that we recognize them and that we don't let them rule us. And here's an important part of negativity, right? Which is the polar opposite of positivity, is that we actually make it worse by the conversation we have in our head. And this is true for a lot of us. And some of us have trained ourselves through therapy and through work with maybe coaches to train ourselves to recognize it. But these are things that happen quite frequently, and being able to recognize it, just like recognizing your emotion, is the first step toward loosening its hold on your behavior and therefore your overall sense of peace of mind and positivity. So one of the things that we often do is that we look at a situation and we filter everything out that's positive and focus only on the negative that's in front of us. So this happens quite frequently with young children as they're learning emotional regulation, but unfortunately it happens to a lot of us on a daily basis. So an example of this might be that we walk into a meeting and we have an agenda set, right? Some particular issue that we want to bring up, and all of a sudden the conversation devolves away from what our focus is, and we feel we filtered out everything else because the conversation could have gone in great directions. We got good information. We created a great sense of collaboration, but we didn't meet the goal that we had walking in the door. And so we filter all the good things that were about the meeting and just focus on the fact that we didn't get what we wanted when we walked in. Personalizing is another way to think about recognizing what is yours to deal with and what is other people's to deal with. And if we think about the state of our world right now, which is very polarized, if you watch the news quite frequently and you follow things really closely, you can oftentimes personalize things that are happening really far away, thousands of miles away. You can recognize that there's a disaster happening in another part of the world. You can feel empathy. Maybe you can even contribute money. But then you've reached the limit of what you can actually do in that situation. But to continue to think about that and mull those things over in our mind means that you've taken something that happened to a group of people thousands of miles away, and you've made it live inside of your own body, inside of your own emotions, inside of your own head. And that is never helpful. It does not improve the life of those people far away, and it greatly diminishes what's happening for you. A lot of us, and myself included, did this during 9/11. If you can remember what was happening in your life at 9/11, for those of us who are older and we're adults during that time period, I remember that in the weeks, well, probably the 2 weeks after 9/11, I pretty much watched CNN on nonstop, right? Wanting to know what was happening, trying to make sense of a world that really seemed confusing. And I personalized it in a way that actually created some real issues for me and for my small children at the time. And it wasn't until someone came to me and said, hey, you need to stop watching the news because it's not helping you, it's making things worse. I was supposed to be on a plane that morning, right? I was on my way to the airport when I got the news. And so all kinds of cascades of things happened, but I continued to personalize that in a way that was not helpful. And we often do that in small and large ways. Understanding, is that ours to deal with? Or maybe it isn't. Is there something that we can do to affect that situation positively? Great, then we should do it. And if not, we should step back and take control and focus on the things that are in our little sphere of influence and act positively in that way. Catastrophizing. So certain personalities that people have can move to this. That means that I woke up late, I got a runner in my stocking, I dropped my lunch on the way out to the car. I get in the car and I realize I'm on E and I have to stop to get gas, but I'm running late, right? So all of a sudden, all of these things have happened, which are an indication that maybe we haven't put the best effort into our daily routine to keeping us on track. But then all of a sudden we're like, I'm done for the day, right? Nothing is ever gonna work out for me again. I'm just gonna go and I'm gonna go back home, say I'm sick, right? So taking something that's happening in front of us, and instead of solving the problem, we just do everything we can to make it worse. So making it worse is this idea of catastrophizing. And then blaming. Some people do this more than others, right? The fact that I woke up late and there's no gas in my car and I dropped my lunch is nobody's fault but my own, right? Now, if your teenager took your car out and took it on a long joyride and didn't tell you and didn't fill up the gas tank, that's a different issue. But in general, who is to blame? You are, right? It's not somebody else outside of you. And what I think the power of that is recognizing what it is for us to deal with is that I can make a better decision the next time so that when I wake up late, or I do a better job making sure I don't wake up late, that I have prepared all these other things. And the work that we put into that preparation aids in how we feel about our day going forward. And then magnifying, right? This one thing that happened to us, whatever it might be. I once gave a presentation to a group of people and the power went out in the middle of the presentation. And I thought the presentation was over, but they literally asked me to stand up and finish the presentation in the dark with just emergency lights on. No PowerPoint, no notes that I could read. And so I, in that moment, felt myself like magnify this issue, and I realized I had a choice, right? I was in the middle of the presentation. I knew the content. I could certainly keep going. But for a moment, I magnified it to such an extent that I almost had an anxiety attack in the moment, right? So we can do that in big and small ways on a daily basis, taking something that could be bad, obviously, but making it worse by not allowing ourselves to think through, what is the solution? How can I work through this particular problem? And then polarizing, which is, of course, a definition of our entire country at the moment, but taking one side or the other. And the truth is that the truth and the data and the facts often lie somewhere in the middle, right? So not allowing this negative talk to create these scenarios, these situations that pull us into a place of negativity, that pull us into a place where we cannot solve problems, where we have have decided through these self-talk negative habits that we can't solve the problem. So what is the way that we can take positively and take conscious action? Because these things are going to happen in our life, right? We're going to feel that emotion. We're going to have a bad morning. We're going to catastrophize on occasion. So what are some of the things that we can do? And the first and foremost is the question that I often ask myself, is this really mine, right? Is what's happening in that moment? And as a parent, we need to do this more frequently, right? My child did not do their homework the night before, and it's the morning, and they're having an absolute meltdown because they didn't bother to do their homework. So is this mine to deal with? Yes, I have something I need to do. I need to teach my child a lesson for consequences of their actions, and then I need to let it go because it is theirs to deal with and not mine. So this happens to us all the time, especially if you work in group settings, if you have a lot of clients, if you have a family that you're really connected to. Oftentimes we connect ourselves so deeply with the people in our lives that we take on things that aren't ours. And we overwhelm ourselves and we don't help that other person to really learn and develop the skills that they need to take ownership of their own things. So this is one of the most important aspects of shifting from negativity into positivity, is recognizing what it is for you to deal with. And at the core of that is that there are oftentimes going to be things you can't do anything about, right? The world situation, a hurricane, you can't do anything about those things. Maybe you can offer money, if you're an aid worker, you might be able to go and help. But in general, for most of us, there's nothing that we can do. So it's not ours, right? You need to relieve yourself of that responsibility. I heard a research study just recently, I think it was in the New York Times, somebody was talking about research on how our connection to world events, catastrophes and strife and wars and really severe forms of violence all over the world, that human beings were not designed to know about what was happening everywhere in the world. That that is not healthy for us. It's not helpful for us. There's nothing that we can do. And so that maybe disconnecting from some of that, not to say that suffering and, if there's something that you could do, you should do, but not trying to take all that on because it's too much. And then once you've decided whether it's yours or not, can you do anything? Is there what can be changed, right? So if I'm at the end of my very long bad day that started with getting up late and I made it all the way to the end of the day, I can review back what happened and look for ways to not let that happen again. And when we take action, we feel better, right? We move from a place of negativity to a place of being positive. Okay, I'm the one who's responsible. I can't blame anybody else. That also means that I can fix this. And when we do that, we actually feel better about ourselves. We actually move to a place of positivity. Means you can take action. You can do something about the situation. And then, are there things that must be accepted? And that's a hard one for a lot of us. Are there things that we cannot change that we must accept? And we need to sit with that, because that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do anything, but maybe we just need to understand that it's not ours to fix. It's something that we just need to understand, to accept, and to be able to move past. And then what action will result in the best outcome, right? So if I had that really bad day and I'm reviewing it at the end of the day and I'm rethinking what all the things that I did or didn't do in the 24 hours leading up to that really bad day, and I can ask myself, what can I do better, right? Maybe I need to get a louder alarm clock, right? Maybe I need to go to bed earlier. Maybe I need to make sure that I always check my gas tank before I make it all the way home from work the day before. Maybe I need to, before I go to sleep, make sure all my things are laid out and my lunch is ready to go, and my schedule is ready to go. Whatever it might be, again, action leads to positivity. It's not putting a smile on your face when the world is going to, you know, is falling at your feet. It's because you can take an action. And then what can be done differently, right? So what are the actions that can result in a better outcome? And what are the things that I can do? And in that, once you've determined those things, there's going to be other things that you have to accept. And that can be a harder, more long-term issue. But positivity is the result of conscious action. Yeah, I got it. I love this word equanimity, right? So I came to really have a clear understanding of this word when I was on my journey to become a yoga instructor. And at the time, I had a really intense job. I had 2 small children, and 1 day a week for 16 weeks, I spent 14 hours doing yoga and meditation and really intense work. And a lot of us would come scrambling in the morning, like at 7 a.m., and we would be there together until almost 9 o'clock in the evening, doing all of this really intense work with all of these things swirling around in our lives around us. And we were expected to come to this yoga, class and training, very centered and very focused and very calm. And half the time I never felt that way. But the idea was that you don't feel that way by pretending you feel that way. You feel that way because you put effort into the decisions that you make, the routines that you build into your life, and the ways that you view decision making. So equanimity is this sense of mental calmness and composure, evenness of temper, especially when you're in a difficult situation. And that is not always easy, because all the other things we talked about, our emotions get in the way, our bad planning gets in the way, all kinds of things, our own perhaps disposition that makes us see things worse than they are, or our desire to take on more than we should. This sense of equanimity is this idea that you can bring these things into your life in such a way that when the monsoon is around you, you can stand in the center and get wet and be okay with it.
Excuse me, is that the same as resilience?
No, I think there is an overlap between the ideas of resilience. Resilience is almost always the outcome of healthy habits, because you're building this reserve of extra energy, you're putting effort into your health and well-being. And equanimity is more of a mindset. Yeah, so it's more of it's not something that you can cultivate directly and say, I'm going to have equanimity in the middle of the situation. It's like, no, you have to do some work to get to that place of it. But they definitely overlap. And if you are resilient, you're more likely to be able to cultivate equanimity in a situation. And if you have that mindset of wanting to have equanimity in difficult situations, you're more likely to be resilient because of it. Yeah, so there's definitely connection between those two. So what are some of the conscious actions that we can take that lead us to positivity? And number 1 is connecting to our body, right? Because positivity is ruined by allowing our emotions to carry us away. And our emotions really start and live in our body. And so recognizing what's happening for us, knowing that when you walk into certain situations, certain meetings, that you're around certain people, that you feel a certain way, and understanding what that sensation connects to emotion-wise, right? So this often happens, and it's called the white coat syndrome. When you walk into a doctor's office, many of us have that. You walk into a hospital, you walk into a clinic, doctor with a white coat walks into your room, and all of our thoughts went out of our mind because we're overwhelmed by worry or anxiety because of it. And if we can connect with what's happening in our body, right? Maybe we feel fear, or we feel anxiety, and fear oftentimes lives somewhere up in here in our shoulders. Anxiety is often in our throats. Fear also can live in our belly. So just noticing what those emotions connect to physically in your body can help us name what we're feeling. And connections to our body help us identify what's happening for us. And the first step to allowing them not to carry you away and control you is to be able to name and identify it. So being connected to the body. And this takes work. So doing practices like yoga and meditation and Tai Chi and Qigong, all of them help us build a stronger connection to our physical body. Or just simply doing the work of feeling our emotions. Being in the moment. So much of our conscious intention gets carried away, swept into the past, right? Regret, sadness, fear, or thinking to the future where anxiety and worry live, right? What's going to happen? How's this all going to work out? And the reality is, in this moment, if we can be present, we can make some really good decisions that will improve our future. Dwelling on it isn't going to help us, right? Being in the moment, being in our body helps us to take better actions, to make better decisions. And sometimes taking a breath, right? Just like that idea of between stimulus and response, right? Between what's happening around you and how you're going to react to the situation, there's a space. And one of the ways to get to that space is to take a couple of deep breaths. And then when you can take a couple of deep breaths, we energize the body physically, we're conscious of what's happening, and we can observe what's happening around us in such a way that we can make a better decision in that moment. And sometimes we struggle with something that's really tough and we need to flip it around, right? So something bad happens, we name it as bad. Something happens, right? We didn't get to our we didn't get to present our idea. We didn't get to our idea in the meeting, and we feel like that's a bad thing. But if we flip around and say, maybe that was the best thing to happen, take whatever you think it is and just allow yourself to play a game or have an exercise, right? Doesn't mean that it's going to result in like all of a sudden something bad turns into something good, but it allows us to see the situation a little bit differently. And positivity is always about the ability to take an action or make a decision that allows us to see things more clearly. So flipping it around is one of my favorite things to do. And I do that all the time. And I have adult kids, and occasionally they'll come to me, especially during the pandemic, and a lot of bad things happen. Like they lost jobs, they lost relationships, they lost apartments. And they would say, oh my God, I can't believe this is like the worst thing that could ever happen. And I was like, well, what if it's actually the best thing that ever happened? You weren't really always that happy in that apartment, were you? Or you had second thoughts about that relationship or whatever it is. So maybe this is the best thing. Just give it some space and see what it actually turns out to be. Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. It's hard to tell. It's only in retrospect, like with some time, that we know whether it was truly good or bad for us. So this idea of flipping it around. And the other time, we just need to remove ourselves from certain situations, right? That we are circling the drain, as I say, right? We're caught in a negative spiral. We're caught up in the emotions and the chaos of whatever's happening for us. And we're circling the drain, right? We're going down the drain. We're not able to take these deep breaths and allow some space and be physically in our body. So sometimes we just need to say, I need a couple minutes. I used to do this quite frequently when my kids were teenagers, and they were giants. They were both over 6 feet tall by the time they were 14. And I could not intimidate them in any way, shape, or form with some kind of, authority. So I would often have to walk away from situations that they would rile me up with, which they can do, right? Because they're connected to you. And I would have to take a deep breath, and I would have to think, okay, what is the best thing that could happen in this situation? What is my next best action? And I could not usually do that in their presence. I needed to step away from the situation. And again, positivity doesn't mean a smile on your face and everything's happy and great. It means, can I take an action to improve the situation? And I would step away and I'd come back and I'd say, hey, I needed a few minutes because I was really angry and things weren't going to go well. And I've had a chance to think about it. And here's what I'm thinking, I want to hear what you think, right? I can be reasonable. And because of it, we have a great relationship today, and thankfully they both are on a really good course. So stepping away was often a good thing to do. And I see them both kind of use that technique themselves because they actually inherited some of my emotional side. And so stepping away is a really good technique. Now you can use all of these things. You can use one of these things that's like a really good tool for you. But the more that you practice it in small ways and even in big ways, the more likely it is to become part of the way that you deal with things that are tough. Oh, that's my last one. Okay, there we go. So I want to, there's nobody in the room, so I can't really ask these questions. But I was going to ask is, can you think of a time in your life when you did something in the midst of a difficult situation or something that you thought was negative that then resulted in you making a better decision? That you want to share. I should definitely say that. Or maybe something that you wish you'd made a better decision. Yeah.
So I was talking about once who could be very political and inflammatory, and he was really getting under my skin. And I said, you know what, I'm gonna hang up the phone now, and when you're feeling better, you can call me later, or not. It's okay, but I need to step away because you're really being insulting. And he didn't know what to do. And I said, okay, I'm hanging up, bye, and I hung up. And I didn't feel badly about it, I didn't feel guilty or second guess myself, but I could have really, popped off on him on the phone and perhaps destroyed a relationship, but I guess that would be stepping away and maybe taking a breath, but I was able to put some space mentally between his attack verbally and myself and said, this isn't for me.
Yeah.
So
That's really smart. That's really good. And I know a lot of us during the pandemic, there were a lot of political issues that came up and caused a lot of distress during family holidays and dinners and things like that. So it's great that you were able to do that. And you had this greater idea is that you wanted to preserve the relationship while also setting an appropriate boundary, right? This is not okay for me. I'm not going to allow myself to be subjected to it. Positivity doesn't say that you have to deal with it, whatever's happening. It means that you made appropriate actions that led to you feeling better and preserve the relationship hopefully at some point down the line. That's really good. That's a really good example. Anybody else?
I'll share one. Working with my cable company, frustrating. So they increased my bill. I call in to find out why, and the rep wasn't very friendly or nice, but she explained, just matter of fact, oh yeah, there was an increase. And I was trying to find out, are there any other discounts, or, how can I get this back down? Is there any way? And she just had a real poor attitude and was really, short with me. And I needed to take a moment because I wanted to react the same way that she did. I wanted to say some things to her, but I chose not to because I've always heard that it's better to catch a bee with honey. So I remained nice and sweet, and sometimes I'll use that. And in that scenario, unfortunately, she wasn't able to do anything further. However, I have learned that using that catch bee with honey, be sweet and nice going into a conversation, because oftentimes that does help to get, if it can, that they're going to be more apt to try to help you if you're nice. Even if you get the bill and you're outraged, you got to try to, when I call them, I need to approach it. I need to be nice when I call them, so they can help make it get wrong.
Yeah, that's great. And keeping that bigger idea that I want to solve this problem and reduce my own expense, right? And you were also, really thoughtful about what was happening for that other person. And so often the way that people come at us, or the way that people address us, or the people's reaction, sometimes even if they're attacking us, that it's almost always about what's happening for them and almost never about you. You're merely the target for something that's happening internally for them. And so when we think about, hopefully I can go back a couple, this idea of, that's right, just bring me from the beginning, that'd be good. But this idea of what is mine? What is mine? And both of you, okay, now I can't figure out which way to go back. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Good work. What is mine and what is someone else's? What is their, how much of their reaction and their emotional state is due to me, and that can I do anything about it? And right, is this really mine? For both of you, how they were treating you had nothing to do with you. It was theirs. It was not yours. But you both made decisions that got you to a place where ultimately you preserved things in a way that was meaningful or helpful or in a positive way for you, even though you had to go through those situations. I'm going to be sitting on city council in my own town, and things oftentimes come up and people draw me into conversations that are not mine, right? They just want someone to hear them out, and occasionally I can provide them some resources that might be helpful. But it's really important that I stay in my own space and still be compassionate for what they're experiencing, but give them the tools to help them solve some of their own problems rather than taking it all on. Because I actually have a pretty big ward, and that would not be helpful, and it's just a part-time gig. It's not meant to be a full-time job. And so making sure that we identify what is ours and what belongs to somebody else is such an important skill. And it does lead to us having more positive feelings and better positive relationships. When we have children and we take on too much of their own responsibility, they don't learn how to navigate the world effectively. They don't learn what their own boundaries are. They don't learn about their own responsibilities or the power that comes from following through on them, right? The sense of ownership and the sense of self-esteem that you get from coming through challenges all comes from things that are difficult, right? Being able to sit with the discomfort and still move forward through it is such an important aspect for positivity. And again, positivity is not about a smile on your face. Positivity is feeling that you have taken an action that moves you closer to something that matters to you, that somehow satisfies preserving a relationship, getting your discount that you deserve, whatever it might be. It's a way to move through the process. Life is like that. If we get anxious and excited and emotional and triggered by everything that happens to us, we're never going to have a healthy life. It doesn't matter how many sit-ups you do or how many salads you eat. If you're constantly being influenced and controlled by situations around you, you will never have good overall health and well-being, because everything around you has more control than you do yourself. So any other thoughts about that? Anybody else have like a technique, something that you do that's like a really, helpful to you? I mean, maybe we didn't talk about it. I mean, I only talked about some of the main ones that research shows us are helpful, but.
I heard somewhere, and I told myself this frequently, feelings aren't facts.
Yes.
So I might have an upset stomach or because something's making me anxious, but that doesn't mean I'm sick. Doesn't mean I can't get through it. Something might make me emotional or want to cry or whatever, but that's okay, just cry. It's not, you're not gonna die from it. I was like, that feelings aren't facts.
Feelings aren't facts. That's so true. That's really important. But we make feelings facts all the time, right? We make emotions and feelings facts, like this is the truth. And oftentimes it's because we live in our head and not in the moment. And we haven't carefully observed what's happening in front of us. So I love that. That's feelings aren't facts. That's a great one. Something from you?
I mean, the guy that lives with two women that definitely express their feelings all the time. I learned I learned how to be quiet. Like you let them talk. You let them, like I say, if they were mad at me for a reason, or they throw words out that they don't mean. I just say okay. I go and I sit down and I let them think about what they said. I'm not gonna say a word to you. That's what I learned. To be quiet, let them think about what they've done, and they usually come back eventually, apologize, and then we can actually talk about it after. But in the moment, I feel like when the feelings and everything are going up in the air, it's like it's no point. I always was a mediator when I was younger. I always got attacked from both ends. So honestly, being quiet and let you mediate the situation and let them be mad at you, and you end up solving everybody because you're the one in the middle anyway. So like, think quiet, let them think about it, and then after that, we end up being a happy family after that. But then it goes on and on. So my thing is to be quiet, think about the situation myself, let them think about it as well, and then we come back to it. So it's more so. That's what I've learned more about for me. Real quiet. I can take deep breaths here and there, but there's not a lot of breaths going on with me. You usually got to start talking a little bit after a while. So that's more step away. I think about step away, but more a step away also making somebody think. I'm not replying to it. I'm not going to think that.
Yeah, that's actually really smart strategy when things are really emotionally charged. Were these siblings? Okay, yeah, I thought so. You didn't say that, but I had that sensation. I was watching your body language and I'm like, I'm pretty sure these are siblings. But I heard from you too. You stepped away, but you also said, this isn't mine, right? This isn't mine. This isn't mine to own. But then you came back around and you wanted to repair the situation, right? You wanted to have that conversation. So you engaged when it wasn't emotionally charged. So really smart strategy. Awesome. I love hearing that. Are you good? Are you close with that still?
100%.
All right.
Yeah, that's my family. I love it to death. But with family, you understand like, okay, this person reacts this way. Like when you're the mediator, you know what takes off somebody. So I've been like that all my life. So it's like,
that's a powerful position.
Oh yes, it is.
With great power comes great responsibility, and I can see you wield it appropriately. So.
Yeah, try my best.
Anything from anybody online on Zoom that want to share? You can put something in the chat, or can they unmute themselves? Could we hear them?
You need a microphone?
You put something in the chat. Feel like you can. Sometimes we learn from these examples of sharing with each other. It's a great way to kind of illustrate what we're talking about.
Anybody?
Yeah. It's okay. So I wanna leave you with one idea, one thought, that in any situation that you're in where emotions are high, the more stable that you can be, the more likely that you will help everyone else calm down too, right? So if you can be that kind of person in the center. This happened to me a lot because I used to work in union negotiations, almost always around health plans, a very charged environment. And I would build relationships with the sponsoring organization, and I would build close relationships with the unions, making sure I understand what the needs were on both sides. And then I would oftentimes be in the room when we came together around the negotiations to be there to answer questions and to make sure that people had the appropriate information that they needed to make a good decision. And oftentimes these conversations got really, really charged. And so the night before, I would make sure that I did every healthy habit that I know about. I would eat a great meal. I would make sure I exercise. I would meditate. I would get to bed early. I would make sure I had a really healthy breakfast. I would make sure I greeted people. And still, the situations would often get emotionally charged. And so I often became a mediator, right? And I used, to everyone's benefit, the relationship of trust that I have built on both sides, so that hopefully we can bridge and come to a place of compromise where everybody got what they wanted. And I knew that I needed to do all of those things because at the end of the day, I would be so exhausted, I would literally have to get a car ride home because I couldn't drive either back to my hotel. And so remembering all of these things and why we do them, what is your bigger purpose, right? Is it to find compromise? Is it to have a better relationship? Is it to find a powerful way forward, especially if you're working in an organization? That thinking about these actions and the work that you do for yourself will benefit everyone around you. So remembering that, I think, can be really, really helpful. So be sure to stay connected to yourself, remember all those healthy habits, and remember your bigger reason for doing things in any situation. So I just have those last two slides. Oh, I got it back. So these resources are really great. So if you want to learn more about building positivity, there's a great article from the Mayo Clinic, Positive Thinking, Stop Negative Self-Talk. And so a lot of the ideas that I used here are based in rich in science. And then this Forbes article is a really great way to think about how you could put these things into practice with your teams or with your groups. And then an information on how to think about positivity. Again, not this about putting a smile on your face when stuff is going bad, but finding your way forward where you can take a place of action that's meaningful. And then if you have anything that came up that you want to discuss with me, you're always welcome to reach out to me directly. Occasionally that does happen with your group, and so I'm completely open to it and happy to connect you with whatever resources I can. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.